Japan. A little island country in the east side of Asia. Never heard of it. Just kidding. How could I disrespect the greatest country in the world? Well, if you like the greatest country in the world, Asia, that produced the greatest ghost stories in the world, well, you're in luck, because these are ghost stories from Asia. You know, Asian countries are really great at delivering a good experience when it comes to ghost stories, so enjoy this video. On camera, true scary paranormal ghost stories, and please don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe if you're new, especially because we deliver these on-camera videos and long videos all in 1 week. So if you like long audio horror, if you like the on-camera videos so you can see my weird face, recording stories, well, you've come to the right place. And I'm basically the great value version of Mr. Ballin. So enjoy the video, and I hope you enjoy the atmosphere. I never believed in urban legends. At least not until that fateful night in Muraoka High School. I'd heard whispers of Aka Manto, a spirit said to haunt the last stalls of women restrooms. A tale passed down by students, with hushed voices and trembling hands. I dismissed it as a product of overactive imaginations. A ghost story meant to spook first-year girls on their first day. Yet nothing could have prepared me for what I would soon experience. It was a chilly October evening in Morioka, a small town in the Iwata Prefecture, where the autumn leaves turned fiery red and gold. I was returning home after an after-school club meeting, a quiet return day in every way, until I needed to use the restroom in the school's aging building. The halls were nearly empty. The lingering echoes of footsteps and distant chatter had faded into a heavy silence. I entered the girls' restroom, a dim tilted space with flickering fluorescent lights and the faint, musty odor of old disinfectant. The room was divided into several stalls, but one in particular always gave me pause. The furthest stall, tucked away in the corner, its doors scuffed and paint peeling. A legend said that this was where Aka Manto appeared. I tried to shrug off a shiver that ran down my spine as I approached, chalking it up to the cold in my own racing imagination. I chose a stall away from the notorious one, but as fate would have it, that night, an inexplicable force drew me towards it. Perhaps it was solitude, the near emptiness of the space, or maybe just a compulsion I couldn't understand. I found myself standing before the door of the last stall, my hand hovering over the chipped brass handle. For reasons I can't explain, I opened the door and stepped inside. The stall was smaller than the others. The walls lined with faded graffiti and peeling decals that once perhaps advertised school events. The only light came from a sickering, flickering bulb overhead that cast uneven, jittery shadows across the cold floor. I took a deep breath, determined to prove to myself that nothing paranormal was lurking in the forsaken corner of the school. I sat down, half expecting the oppressive silence to remain unbroken. Minutes ticked by in almost an unbearable stillness. Then, as I leaned back, the unmistakable sound of a slow, deliberate rustling caught my attention. I could swear it wasn't even the sound of my own breathing. At first I dismissed it, a draft perhaps, or the sound of the old pipe settling. But soon, a voice emerged from the darkness, smooth yet chilling, asking, as if in a measured voice, "Red paper or blue paper?" My heart hammered in my chest. I froze, unable to move or speak. The voice, deep and eerily calm, repeated the question. Red paper or blue paper? It was not a shout or a scream, but a quiet, resonant tone that filled the small space and seemed to echo off the stained walls. I remember thinking, is this some kind of sick prank? Or am I dreaming? But there was no one else in the stall, only me, and the presence that seemed to materialize from the very shadows. My rational mind battled with the undeniable dread that surged through me. I had heard the legend of Aka Manto, a male spirit in a red cloak and mask who haunted this very stall, asking that fateful question. According to the stories, answering red would result in a gruesome, bloody fate, while choosing blue meant being suffocated until one turned blue. I sat there paralyzed by fear and disbelief. Every rational part of me screamed to call out, to run, to do something. Yet my body remained still, locked in place by terror. I tried to recall if there was any advice on how to respond in these legends, but nothing solid came to mind. I knew I had to choose my words carefully, as if my very life depended on it. Time seemed to stretch interminably as the voice repeated its question once more. In that moment, I resolved to rely on instinct rather than fear. I mustered the courage to speak, my voice trembling, but steady as I said, "Blue paper." The silence that followed was even more profound than before. The voice did not answer again. Still, shadows seemed to swirl and then dissipate. The oppressive chill lifted slightly, and the flickering light steadied, as if nothing unusual had occurred. I sat there shaking, trying to process what just happened. I wasn't sure if I had just narrowly escaped a gruesome fate, or if I had unwittingly condemned myself to something unknown, even darker destiny. In the days that followed, I found myself obsessing over that encounter. I returned to Morioka High School several times, seeking answers. I spoke with teachers and janitors, but no one would confirm or deny the legend. Some dismissed it as a campus myth, an urban legend grown out of teenage fear and imagination, while others whispered that they had heard strange sounds in the bathroom late at night. The experience left me with a profound sense of isolation and curiosity about the thin veil between our world and something beyond. I eventually learned more about the legend of Aka Manto from a local historian. According to her research, Aka Manto was once a troubling student at Morioka High, rumored to have been bullied and driven to despair. His spirit, some said, never found peace and instead lingers in the corridors of the school, manifesting in this old stall as a twisted echo of his own anguish. Over time, his legend evolved, merging with other local beliefs in vengeful spirits and ghostly warnings. There was even a documented case in the 1960s where several students reported hearing the same voice, though no concrete evidence ever surfaced. For me, the encounter was neither a hoax nor a hallucination, but a raw, unfiltered moment where the past seemed to bleed into the present. It was the kind of experience that leaves an indelible mark on your soul. A reminder that sometimes the stories we dismiss as mere myth can hold a kernel of truth, a truth so terrifying that it defies logic and reason. I share this account not to incite fear, but to remind us all that the world is filled with mysteries, some of which remain unsolved. The echo of Aka Manto's voice still haunts me, a spectral reminder that the boundary between the living and the dead is fragile, especially in places steeped in history and sorrow. And on quiet, stormy nights, when the wind whistles through the corridors and the shadows seem to stretch just a little too far, I sometimes think I can still hear that ghostly question: red paper or blue paper? I continue my life with a deep awareness that the world holds secrets beyond our understanding. And while I strive to live with courage and rationality, I now carry with me the memory of that fateful encounter, a lesson in humility and the mysterious, often inexplainable power of legends. I arrived in Kyoto on an overcast autumn afternoon. The chill in the air a quiet herald of the unusual experience that lie ahead. My plan was simple: spent a few days exploring the ancient city and its lesser-known spiritual corners before returning to my routine. I had heard murmurs of a peculiar energy in the mountain village of Kamura, an area whispered about among locals for its mysterious happenings, but I dismissed them as the kind of folklore that comes with age. I was, after all, a seasoned traveler, and I had encountered my share of oddities in fear-flung corners of the world. The train ride to Kamura was a serene, quiet journey through the winding roads blanketed in red and gold leaves. As I stepped off the small station, a cool wind greeted me, carrying with it the faint, almost imperceptible scent of incense and damp earth. I followed the narrow road upward, lined with ancient cedars and moss-covered stone steps, each one seeming to murmur secrets of the past. I reached Kamura Dura just as twilight began to descend. The temple complex, tucked into a quiet slope, was a labyrinth of weathered wooden buildings and stone pathways that snaked through dense groves. Despite its age, there was a serene beauty in its decay, a timeless quiet punctuated only by the distant toll of a temple bell. I spent the first evening wandering the temple grounds, photographing the intricately carved statues and the faded murals depicting scenes of myth and legend. Late that night, after returning to my small rented room in a modest Roken in Kamura village, I was restless. Something in the heavy silence of the night, punctuated by the distant tolling of the bed, stirred memories of local urban legend I'd overheard at dinner. The tale of Lady Yuri, a sorrowful spirit said to wander the mountain paths on the cold nights of autumn. They said she was a once devoted priestess at Kamura Dura who, betrayed by those she loved, met a tragic end and was never laid to rest. Instead, her spirit roams the mountain, mourning the loss of a life filled with unfulfilled promises. Sleep eluded me, and I decided to venture out into the temple grounds once more, driven by a mix of curiosity and a need to shake off growing unease. The wind had picked up, rustling through the trees and carrying with it an almost eerie, almost musical whisper. I wandered around a secluded path near a small pond. The water darkened still under the moonlight, the silence thick, and my own footsteps seemed too loud in the profound quiet. Then out of the corner of my eye, I caught a movement, a fleeting ghostly figure that darted behind a cluster of ancient crevices. My heart pounded as I strained to see clearly. The figure was small, barely more than a shadow, but there was something unmistakably human in its shape. It was dressed in tattered traditional garments, green as if echoing the old lore of leprechauns. But its expression was pained, haunted, and deeply sorrowful. I couldn't tell if it was male or female, its features blurred by the dim light in the distance. I followed, drawn inexplicably, moving slowly and cautiously along the path. The figure led me deeper into the maze of trees, towards an area where the remnants of an old stone wall lay partly crumbled. As I approached, the temperature dropped suddenly, and an inexplicable chill crept up my spine. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching me, and the whispers of the wind seemed to form words I couldn't quite decipher. Standing before the wall, I paused. There, etched into the weathered stone, were faint markings, ancient Gaelic symbols mixed with kanji characters that I later learned were meant to ward off evil and guide lost souls. It was as if it was the very wall bore witness to sorrowful history, a story of love, betrayal, and unfulfilled promises. In that moment, the ghostly figure had appeared again, closer this time. I saw the agony in its eyes, an endless mourning that transcended centuries. Its gaze met mine, and for a few long silent seconds, I felt as though I was peering into the abyss of a human regret. Then suddenly, just suddenly, the figure dissolved into the night, leaving with me nothing but the echo of its sorrow and the silent testimony of the ancient wall. I stood there trembling, not knowing whether to rush back or remain and absorb what I'd witnessed. The encounter felt real, painfully real. It wasn't the over-the-top spectacle of a horror movie. It was a quiet, intimate tragedy that seemed to seep from the very stones of Kamura. In the following days, I attempted to piece together what I'd seen. I spoke with a few locals in the hushed tones, an elderly man at a small tea house, and a caretaker at the temple, each of whom had their own version of the legend of the Lady Yuri. Some dismissed my account as the product of over-imagination, but others nodded solemnly, remarking that the spirit of a long-forgotten priestess did indeed wander the mountain on nights like these, her sorrow echoing the lost promises of a bygone era. I'd always scoffed at ghost stories. Tales meant to spook a late-night commuter, nothing more than the product of an overactive imagination. That was until one bitterly cold November night in Numashowa, Hogoa. I had just finished a long day of meetings in Osaka and decided to catch the last train home. Nishimoya Station, tucked on the edge of a bustling city yet retaining a haunting, old-world charm, was almost deserted at that hour. The platform was shrouded in a thick, damp fog that blurred the neon lights and muted the usual hum of commuter chatter. I was waiting near the far end, where the station's modern glow gave way to a more neglected, forgotten corner, a place where the past still whispered through the cracked pavement. I pulled my coat tighter around me as a cold wind cut through the silence, and I found myself scanning the darkened corridor, leaning towards the restrooms. A corridor that local lore warned me to avoid after midnight. I had heard the legend of Teke Teke, a spirit said to be the ghost of a young woman, perhaps once a schoolgirl, who met a gruesome fate on a railway line. According to the whispers, she was sliced in half by a speeding train and now, bereft of logs, drags herself along the ground with only her arms and elbows, producing a chilling tiki tiki sound. Some accounts said that if you encountered her, you'd have to run. If she caught you, she'd slice you in half with a sheath. And one of the more macabre versions, she'd even ask where are my legs, and the only way to survive was to answer, Maishin Expressway. I don't believe in any of that, of course, but as I waited, the distant rumble of a train faded into an eerie stillness, and the fog seemed to thicken. I heard a sound, a rhythmic scraping like nails dragging across the concrete. At first I thought it was my imagination, fueled by the ghost stories I'd dismissed. But then the sound grew closer, echoing down the empty corridor. I rose from my seat, drawn by an inexplicable pull to investigate. Even as every instinct screamed for me to run, my heart pounded in my chest as I crept down the corridor towards the restrooms, where the flickering overhead light threw trembling shadows on the walls. In that impressive silence, every step felt like a violation of some ancient pact with the dark. As I neared the entrance of one of the closed restroom stalls, the scraping sound intensified into a series of sharp, deliberate taps. Teek, teek, teek. I froze, paralyzed by both fear and disbelief. In the weak light I saw her, a figure barely human, no more than 5 feet tall, wearing tattered clothing stained with I can only assume was old blood. Her face was obscured by a mask, but her eyes, if you could even call them that, burned with an intensity of sorrow and fury. She moved in a jerky, unsettling way, dragging herself on her hands and elbows, leaving a trail in the damp concrete as she approached. Time slowed to a crawl. I could hardly breathe as she stepped more feet from me. Then, in a voice that was both childlike and deeply vengeful, she spoke. "Do you like the red?" This question sliced through like the silence like a knife. I recall that some versions of the legend said she would ask where her legs were, demanding a specific answer. My mind raced. Was this her way of asking, should I answer for a heartbeat? I considered the absurdity, responding Mission Expressway, and wondered if that was even meant to be taken literally, or as a twisted riddle.